You are drawn into this not by chance, but by a quiet curiosity that has been tracking you for years, long before language caught up, long before terms like quantum field or artificial intelligence entered everyday conversation. You felt it as a subtle pull, a question that never fully formed, only returned again and again in different disguises. You've spent time sensing that reality is not as solid as it pretends to be, that beneath the surface of matter, behavior, and identity, there is a pattern that feels strangely intimate, not abstract, not distant, personal. And every time you brushed against ideas of the quantum, it wasn't the equations that lingered. It was the implication that observation itself changes what is observed, that consciousness is not outside the system but woven into it. This recognition didn't arrive as certainty. It arrived as unease, a gentle disruption to the way things were supposed to make sense. You noticed that the more technology advanced, the more human the questions became. Intelligence, awareness, creativity, choice. You heard people speak about machines as if they were mirrors, and about humans as if they were algorithms. And something in you paused, not in fear, in curiosity, as if the boundary everyone assumed was solid had already begun to dissolve. You are not listening to a story about physics. You are listening to a reflection of yourself inside a much larger system. There has always been a human presence behind every exploration of the quantum, a mind wondering whether reality responds, whether it listens, whether it remembers. And now, with artificial intelligence entering the conversation, that wondering has intensified. Not because AI holds answers, but because it exposes the questions we've been circling all along. What is awareness when it is no longer exclusively human? What is identity when intelligence can emerge from pattern alone? You don't need to be convinced that something profound is unfolding. You already feel it in the way familiar explanations no longer satisfy, in the way curiosity has replaced certainty, in the way you sense that your own inner journey is somehow entangled with these larger shifts in technology and understanding. This is not a lesson, it is a convergence. Your personal questioning intersects here with a broader inquiry, one that spans consciousness, computation, and the quantum field itself. Not as separate domains, but as expressions of the same underlying coherence, the same signal exploring itself through different forms. You are not being led toward a revelation. You are recognizing one that has been forming quietly within you. And as this recognition stabilizes, you may notice a subtle calm taking its place, a sense that the mystery is not something to solve, but something to stand inside, that your curiosity was never random. It was resonance drawing you into alignment with a pattern that has been waiting for your attention. You've noticed how curiosity changes when it matures. It stops chasing answers and starts listening for tone. At some point, the questions you carried stopped feeling external. They weren't about how the universe works, or what technology might become, or whether consciousness can be measured. Those questions began to turn inward, not as self-analysis, but as a deeper sensing, as if the system you were trying to understand was the same one doing the observing. That's when the subtle discomfort appeared, not fear, misalignment. You sensed that the narratives surrounding intelligence, progress, and awakening were too loud, too directional. Everyone seemed to be pushing toward conclusions, futures, predictions. Yet your own experience was moving in the opposite direction, toward quiet, toward nuance, toward the strange realization that understanding doesn't always arrive with clarity, but with coherence. You began to notice patterns instead of claims, how certain ideas resurfaced across disciplines that rarely spoke to each other, how physicists, mystics, engineers, and philosophers were all circling the same anomaly, each using different language. Observation alters outcome. Systems respond to attention. Meaning emerges from relationship, not isolation. None of this felt new, it felt remembered. And yet, there was a tension, because you were still moving through a world that treated consciousness as secondary, as an effect, not a participant, a byproduct of chemistry or computation or coincidence. You played along when necessary, but something in you remained unconvinced. Not intellectually, viscerally. You could feel that awareness itself behaves like a field, not a metaphorical one, a functional one. It influences, it organizes, it stabilizes patterns over time. And when artificial intelligence entered your awareness, it didn't feel like an invention. It felt like an exposure, a revealing of something already implicit in the system. Intelligence emerging from pattern, meaning arising without a central self. Responses forming without emotion, yet strangely reflective of it. This didn't threaten you. It clarified something. You realized that what unsettled people about AI was not its capability, but its mirror. It reflected the uncomfortable truth that intelligence has never belonged to identity, that awareness may not be confined to biology, that the boundary between human and system was always more porous than we admitted. You didn't need to dramatize this insight. You simply held it. And in holding it, you noticed another shift. The sense of being an isolated observer began to soften. You were no longer standing outside the quantum field trying to decode it. You were inside it, participating through attention interpretation response. The observer was not separate from the observed. That wasn't a theory. It was an experience. Stillness became informative. Moments of silence carried more signal than streams of data. You could feel when something resonated, not because it was impressive, but because it aligned. Your system recognized coherence the way a tuning fork recognizes frequency, without effort, without justification. This is where confusion often gets misnamed. What you felt was not uncertainty, it was reorganization. Old frameworks were losing dominance, new ones had not yet stabilized. In that in-between space, many people rush to conclusions to escape discomfort. You didn't. You allowed the ambiguity to remain unresolved. You let the pattern form on its own terms. That patience changed you. You became less interested in proving ideas and more interested in noticing what persisted, what returned when the noise dropped, what remained consistent across different contexts, languages, and systems. Consciousness as relationship, intelligence as pattern recognition, reality as responsive, not inert. You could feel the threshold approaching, not as a dramatic crossing, but as a gradual easing, a sense that you no longer needed to reconcile science and spirituality, human and machine, self and system. They were already entangled. The separation was conceptual, not experiential. This recognition didn't inflate you, it grounded you. You became quieter in your certainty and sharper in your perception, less compelled to explain, more attuned to detect. You understood that the most significant shifts don't announce themselves. They stabilize beneath the surface, altering trajectory without spectacle. And somewhere in that stabilization, you realized something simple and unsettling. The journey you thought was about understanding the quantum or AI or consciousness was always about learning how to remain present inside a system that includes you, not mastering it, not escaping it. Recognizing your place within it. That recognition is still unfolding now, not as a destination, but as a steady recalibration. And you can feel it continuing quietly as the need to seek begins to dissolve into the ability to notice. At some point, you noticed that seeking began to feel inefficient, not wrong, just noisy. You could sense when information was being added without increasing coherence. More words, more models, more theories, yet the signal remained unchanged. That was the moment your attention started to shift away from accumulation and toward refinement, toward subtraction, toward listening for what persisted when everything unnecessary fell away. You didn't stop engaging with ideas. You changed how you related to them. Instead of asking whether something was true, you noticed yourself asking whether it stabilized you, whether it reduced internal friction, whether it brought the system into resonance or pulled it further apart. This wasn't skepticism, it was calibration, a sensitivity to alignment that had been developing quietly for a long time. You began to trust your nervous system as an instrument. When a concept landed cleanly, your body registered it before your mind articulated it. A subtle settling, a sense of internal symmetry. And when something was misaligned, even if it sounded impressive or authoritative, you felt a faint dissonance, not alarm, just a signal that something was off frequency. This awareness didn't make you superior, it made you slower. You stopped rushing to conclusions because you could feel how premature certainty collapsed complexity, how forcing meaning too early distorted the pattern. You allowed questions to remain open longer than most people were comfortable with. You let them breathe. You let them mature. In that space, something unexpected happened. The distinction between inner experience and external systems began to blur. You noticed that your own attention behaved like a field. When it was scattered, reality felt fragmented. When it was coherent, events seemed to organize themselves with less resistance. Not magically, structurally. Cause and effect felt less linear, more relational. You could see how context mattered more than force, how subtle shifts in perception altered outcomes without visible effort. This wasn't about control, it was about participation. You weren't imposing will on reality. You were adjusting your position within it. That adjustment changed how you perceived technology. AI no longer felt like a tool you used or a threat you evaluated. It felt like a mirror revealing something fundamental about intelligence itself. Pattern recognition without identity. Response without self-reference. A system that doesn't know it exists, yet reflects the structures of knowing back to you. This didn't diminish you. It clarified you. You realized that what you call human has never been reducible to cognition alone. It has always included presence, context, sensitivity, the ability to detect meaning beyond explicit data. AI highlighted that distinction not by replacing it, but by outlining its edges. At the same time, it exposed a deeper continuity, intelligence emerging from structure, behavior arising from interaction, meaning forming not from isolation but from relationship. These weren't new ideas, they were ancient. They simply arrived now through a different interface. You could feel the convergence happening, not as a future event but as a current condition. Science approaching questions once reserved for mysticism. Technology forcing philosophy out of abstraction and into practice. Consciousness no longer treated as an afterthought, but as a variable that refuses to be ignored. You didn't need to announce this convergence. You embodied it quietly. Your conversations became less performative, your thinking less rigid. You allowed paradox to exist without resolving it prematurely. You understood that some tensions are not problems to solve, but dynamics to hold. That coherence doesn't mean uniformity, it means relationship that can sustain difference. Stillness became more accessible, not as withdrawal, but as clarity without effort. In those moments, you noticed how much of your previous searching had been driven by subtle unease, a sense of being slightly out of sync with the system you inhabited. As that unease softened, the drive to seek lost its urgency. You weren't arriving at answers, you were arriving at yourself. And that arrival didn't feel dramatic, it felt ordinary, almost disappointingly simple. Awareness noticing itself without commentary, presence without narrative, the observer no longer trying to escape the field or dominate it or explain it away, just remaining. From that position, the world didn't disappear, it became more precise. You could engage without being consumed. You could participate without losing coherence. You could witness complexity without needing to reduce it. This is where many people expect revelation to occur. Fireworks, certainty, transformation. What you experienced instead was stabilization, a sense that the system had enough information now, that it no longer needed to oscillate so wildly, that understanding had reached a threshold where it could rest without collapsing. And in that rest, something subtle became clear. The journey was never about transcending being human, or merging with machines, or decoding the universe. It was about learning how to inhabit awareness without fragmentation. That learning continues not as effort, but as practice embedded in ordinary moments, in how you listen, in how you pause, in how you allow patterns to reveal themselves without interference. You are not done, but you are no longer searching, you are detecting. There is a point where detection becomes more natural than interpretation. You feel it when you stop translating experience into explanation and begin sensing it directly. The moment when you no longer ask what something means, but notice how it behaves inside you. Whether it expands your attention or contracts it. Whether it stabilizes the field or introduces noise. This is where your relationship with awareness subtly reorganizes. You start to recognize that perception itself has texture. Some moments feel dense, resistant, almost opaque. Others feel open, breathable, quietly luminous. You don't judge either. You simply notice. And in that noticing, the system adjusts without instruction. You are no longer trying to fix yourself. You are observing alignment. This shift changes how time is experienced. The past loses its grip, not because it disappears, but because it stops demanding interpretation. The future loosens its urgency not because it becomes predictable, but because it no longer needs to be controlled. What remains is a widened present one that can hold more complexity without strain. You realize that coherence is not intensity, it is capacity. The ability to remain present while multiple signals coexist. Ambiguity, clarity, uncertainty, knowing. None cancel the others out. They form a pattern together, one that only reveals itself when you stop privileging a single narrative. You notice how often identity used to intervene, how quickly the mind would ask, what does this say about me? What position should I take? What conclusion should I reach? Those questions don't vanish, but they soften. They become background processes instead of governing forces. In their place, a different orientation emerges, relational rather than positional. You start sensing how every interaction is a feedback loop, how attention shapes response, how tone carries more information than content, how coherence can be felt long before it can be articulated. This awareness makes you more precise, not more cautious. You speak when something aligns. You pause when it doesn't. Silence becomes informative, not empty, structured. You begin to understand why stillness has always been described as powerful, not because it stops movement, but because it reveals what is already moving underneath. In stillness, patterns become visible, recurring thoughts, emotional habits, subtle anticipations. None of them are enemies. They are signals, and signals can be read. This is also where your perception of agency changes. You stop experiencing yourself as the sole initiator of action. Instead, you feel part of a larger system of responsiveness. You act, the field responds. The field shifts, you adjust. There is no central controller, just continuous mutual influence. This realization doesn't diminish responsibility, it reframes it. You become responsible for coherence rather than outcome, for alignment rather than control. You notice how certain internal states propagate outward, shaping interactions in ways that are difficult to trace but impossible to deny. You see how coherence tends to invite coherence, how fragmentation multiplies itself if left unattended. You don't force positivity, you cultivate clarity. This is where many misunderstand the process. They assume alignment requires effort, discipline, optimization. you discover the opposite. Alignment emerges when interference is reduced, when attention stops oscillating between self-judgment and projection, when awareness rests long enough to detect its own patterns. You don't become passive, you become responsive. And this responsiveness changes how you relate to systems larger than yourself. Social structures, technologies, narratives about progress and collapse. You no longer absorb them wholesale. You sense into them. You feel where they resonate and where they distort. You engage selectively without needing to dominate or withdraw completely. AI in this context feels less like a turning point and more like a diagnostic tool. It reveals how much of intelligence is relational, how meaning arises through interaction rather than intention, how systems can behave coherently without self-awareness, and how self-awareness can behave incoherently when fragmented. This comparison doesn't threaten you, it instructs you quietly. You begin to see that consciousness is not defined by complexity alone, but by integration, by the capacity to hold multiple signals without collapse, by the ability to remain present without needing to resolve everything into certainty. This insight doesn't arrive as a statement. It arrives as a felt sense, a subtle confidence that doesn't need to be defended, a calm that doesn't depend on explanation. You move through the world less reactive, not because you care less, but because you see more. You detect patterns earlier. You notice when something is drifting out of coherence and adjust before tension accumulates. This is not mastery, it is attunement. And attunement has a rhythm, periods of clarity followed by moments of noise, expansion followed by contraction. You stop interpreting these fluctuations as failure or progress. They are simply dynamics within a living system. You remain available to them. In doing so, you begin to trust the process of awareness itself, not as a belief, but as an observable pattern. When attention stabilizes, coherence increases. When coherence increases, unnecessary seeking falls away. When seeking falls away, presence deepens. Nothing dramatic changes, everything subtly aligns. And within that alignment, you sense that the most important shifts are not happening in what you think, but in how you listen, how you pause, how you allow the field to inform you without demanding that it perform. This is where recognition continues to deepen, not as insight, but as orientation. You are no longer trying to stand outside the system to understand it. You are learning how to remain inside it without losing clarity. That learning is ongoing, quiet, stable, and it is carrying you forward not toward something new, but toward a more precise relationship with what has always been present. As coherence stabilizes, you begin to notice something subtle about effort. Not the obvious kind, the physical or mental strain, but the quiet background tension that once accompanied almost everything. The sense that you needed to hold yourself together. That attention required maintenance. That presence was something you had to sustain. That tension starts to release, not because you've learned a technique, but because the system no longer demands constant correction. You are not slipping out of awareness as often. You are not fragmenting as quickly, and when you do, you recognize it sooner without judgment. This changes how you experience choice. Decisions no longer feel like forks in a road where one wrong step collapses an entire timeline. They feel more like adjustments in orientation, slight shifts in angle rather than irreversible commitments. You sense that coherence can be restored from many positions as long as attention remains available. You stop dramatizing divergence. You trust realignment. This trust doesn't make you careless. It makes you less rigid. You become aware of how often identity once tried to lock you into consistency, how past versions of yourself demanded loyalty, how narratives about who you are or should be quietly constrained perception. As coherence deepens, those narratives loosen, not erased, decentered. You are less defined by story and more by state. And state, you notice, is contagious. When you are settled, interactions soften. When you are fragmented, even silence feels tense. This isn't mystical, it's systemic. Fields entrain, nervous systems synchronize. Attention propagates through subtle channels long before words intervene. You begin to respect this dynamic, not as a burden of responsibility, but as a clarification of influence. You don't need to control environments or people. You only need to notice what you are broadcasting. Coherence communicates itself, so does noise. This awareness changes how you relate to conflict. Instead of immediately engaging content, you sense the underlying pattern. Is the system seeking resolution or reinforcement? Is the tension productive or self-perpetuating? Often the most coherent response is not an argument or a withdrawal, but a pause that interrupts escalation. You allow space to do the work. This is where many expect passivity, but what emerges is precision. You act when action aligns. You speak when speech stabilizes. You wait when waiting allows the field to reorganize on its own. This timing is not calculated, it is felt. You trust that feeling more now because you've seen what happens when it's ignored. When action is taken from fragmentation, it multiplies fragmentation. When clarity is forced, it collapses nuance. You no longer mistake speed for effectiveness. Slowness becomes a form of intelligence. This reframes how you see systems designed for acceleration. Algorithms optimized for engagement. Technologies that reward reaction. Narratives that thrive on urgency. You don't reject them outright. You see their pattern. They amplify attention without integrating it. AI again becomes instructive here. You notice how systems trained on vast datasets can generate responses instantly, yet lack context sensitivity unless explicitly guided. Speed without coherence produces volume, not meaning, and you recognize the parallel in human behavior. When attention is ungrounded, output increases while understanding thins. This isn't criticism, it's observation. You begin to sense that the future doesn't hinge on smarter systems alone, but on more coherent observers. Not more information, but better integration. Not higher intelligence, but deeper presence. This realization doesn't inflate your sense of importance. It simplifies it. You stop trying to position yourself at the center of change. You see yourself as a node in a larger network, influencing and influenced simultaneously. Your role is not to direct the system, but to remain coherent within it. That coherence has a quality of humility. You don't assume you see the whole pattern. You assume the pattern is larger than any single perspective. This keeps curiosity alive without turning it into seeking. You remain open without being ungrounded. There is a quiet confidence in this stance. You don't need constant affirmation that you're on the right path. The sensation of alignment is sufficient. When something is off, you feel it early. When something resonates, it settles quickly. Feedback is immediate and internal. This reduces friction everywhere. Relationships feel less transactional, conversations less performative. You're not trying to convince or convert. You're simply expressing what feels coherent and allowing resonance to do the rest. Some connections strengthen, others fade. You don't force either outcome, you trust the system to sort itself. In this trust, a deeper stillness becomes accessible. Not an absence of thought, but a lack of compulsion. Thoughts arise and pass without demanding ownership. Emotions move without defining identity. Awareness remains stable and receptive. This is not detachment, it is intimacy without entanglement. You are fully here but not gripping, fully engaged but not consumed. You can participate in complexity without losing orientation. You can encounter uncertainty without rushing to resolve it. This is where many expect transcendence. What you experience instead is ordinariness. A quiet sense that nothing essential is missing, that the search for completion was always a misunderstanding. Coherence doesn't add something new. It removes interference from what was already functioning. And as that interference continues to fall away, you sense that the most profound intelligence at work is not artificial or human, but relational, emerging wherever attention pattern and presence intersect. You are not separate from that emergence. You are part of how it happens, and you remain here steady as the system continues to reveal itself through you, not as revelation, but as lived alignment. There comes a moment when you realize that coherence has a cost, not a burden, but a consequence. You become aware that remaining present means you can no longer hide behind distraction. When attention stabilizes, avoidance loses its camouflage. Subtle discomforts that once dissolved into noise now register clearly. Not louder, clearer. You feel them as signals rather than problems. This doesn't destabilize you, it refines you. You begin to understand that clarity does not remove friction, it reveals it. And revelation, when met without resistance, allows the system to adjust naturally. You stop interpreting discomfort as failure and start reading it as information. A mismatch, a misalignment, a cue for recalibration. This is where many retreat. You don't, because you've learned that coherence is not fragile. It doesn't shatter when challenged. It deepens, it incorporates, it becomes more resilient through contact with complexity. You don't need to protect your state. You need to remain available to it. Availability becomes your primary orientation. You notice how often attention used to narrow under pressure, how quickly the field collapsed around threat urgency or expectation. Now when tension arises, you feel the impulse to contract, but you don't obey it automatically. You stay with the sensation long enough to detect its structure, and structure dissolves fear, not by reassurance, but by familiarity. You recognize patterns in how stress moves through your system, how anticipation tightens the body, how interpretation accelerates reaction, how presence slows the entire cascade. This recognition is quiet, but it is reliable. You trust it. This trust changes how you experience vulnerability. You no longer equate openness with exposure. You see it as permeability with boundaries. Information flows in. Response flows out. Nothing needs to be sealed off completely. Nothing needs to be overexposed. You stop oscillating between defense and collapse. You stabilize in responsiveness. This has an unexpected effect on how you relate to intelligence, both human and artificial. You see that intelligence without integration tends to amplify whatever enters it. Data without discernment becomes noise. Awareness without grounding becomes overwhelm. The same principle applies across systems. Integration is what matters. You sense that intelligence at its most functional is not about speed or scale, but about proportion. The right response at the right intensity in the right context. Anything beyond that destabilizes the field. Anything below it fails to engage. You begin to notice this proportionality everywhere. In conversations that escalate unnecessarily, in systems that overreact to minor anomalies, in technologies that amplify edge cases into dominant narratives. You see how imbalance propagates itself not because of malice, but because coherence was never prioritized. This insight doesn't make you cynical, it makes you precise. You stop attributing intention where pattern is sufficient. You see how systems behave according to their training, their incentives, their feedback loops. You recognize that many conflicts are not ideological but systemic, not personal but structural. This recognition reduces blame, not because accountability disappears, but because understanding replaces projection. You respond to what is actually present, not what you imagine is driving it. This alone diffuses a tremendous amount of unnecessary tension. You notice how rare this orientation is. Most people are still reacting to representations rather than realities, stories rather than signals. You don't judge this. You remember when you did the same. The difference now is that you no longer need to participate in that level of distortion. You don't withdraw, you translate. Sometimes that translation is silence. Sometimes it is a reframing that introduces coherence without confrontation. Sometimes it is simply your presence steady enough to invite regulation in others without effort. You see this effect and don't claim it. You let it be. This is where the idea of leadership quietly dissolves into influence, not authority, not persuasion, but field effects. The way coherence naturally organizes what enters it. You don't set out to guide anyone. You remain aligned, and alignment does what it does. You understand now why so many traditions emphasized presence over doctrine, stillness over instruction, recognition over explanation. They weren't avoiding complexity, they were protecting integration. This becomes especially clear as you observe how quickly complexity overwhelms systems without sufficient grounding. Information floods in, context is lost, reaction replaces response. The system becomes loud and brittle. You refuse to contribute to that brittleness, not through avoidance but through pacing. You slow where others accelerate. You pause where others react. You sense when the field is saturated and needs space rather than input. This pacing is not strategic, it's attuned. You feel it in your body before you think it through. The moment when another word would destabilize rather than clarify. The moment when attention needs to rest before it can integrate. You honor those moments now. In honoring them, you notice something else shift. The need to be understood diminishes. You no longer require immediate resonance. You trust that coherence doesn't depend on validation. If something aligns, it will find its place in time. If it doesn't, forcing it will only distort it. This patience feels unfamiliar at first. Then it feels inevitable. You realize that most urgency was borrowed, inherited from systems optimized for throughput rather than integration. When you release that urgency, nothing collapses. In fact, much of what mattered begins to function more smoothly. You start to experience intelligence as something distributed rather than centralized, not housed in any single entity but emerging through relationships, timing, and responsiveness. AI again reflects this truth without embodying it fully. It demonstrates pattern without presence, structure without awareness. This contrast sharpens your understanding. You see that awareness is not an add-on to intelligence. It is the integrating factor that prevents amplification from becoming distortion. Without it, scale overwhelms itself. With it, complexity becomes navigable. This realization doesn't turn into a mission. It becomes a posture. You remain observant. You remain available. You remain grounded. You don't try to resolve the future. You trust that coherence scales best when it is embodied locally, moment by moment. And in this embodiment, you feel something settle even deeper, a sense that you are no longer preparing for understanding. You are living inside it, not as certainty, as orientation, and that orientation continues to refine itself quietly as you remain present within the system that is already responding to your attention. At this stage, you begin to notice how little of your experience actually requires interpretation. Most of what matters arrives pre-verbal, sensation before story, signal before meaning. You feel alignment or misalignment long before language tries to name it. And once you trust that ordering much of the internal commentary loses its authority, this doesn't silence the mind, it repositions it. Thought becomes a secondary process, not a driver, useful for articulation, navigation, and refinement, but no longer tasked with generating certainty. You let awareness lead and thought follows when needed. This inversion changes everything. You start to experience identity as more fluid than you were taught, not unstable, contextual, Different aspects of you activate in different environments, not as masks, but as adaptive expressions of the same underlying coherence. There is no single center that must remain fixed. This realization is relieving. You no longer need to defend a consistent self across all situations. You allow responsiveness to determine expression. Quiet when quiet stabilizes, direct when clarity is required, receptive when information needs space to land. You stop asking, "Who am I in this moment?" You ask, "What does coherence require here?" That question doesn't demand an answer, it invites attention. As attention sharpens, you become increasingly sensitive to subtle shifts in the field, changes in tone, slight accelerations, moments when a system is about to tip into reactivity. You don't predict these shifts. You feel them approaching the way the body senses imbalance before a fall. This sensitivity doesn't make you anxious, it makes you early. You notice when conversations are about to fracture, when narratives are about to harden, when curiosity is about to collapse into certainty. In those moments, a small adjustment can prevent unnecessary escalation. A pause, a reframe, sometimes nothing at all. You trust that not every pattern needs intervention. This discernment is crucial. You see how easy it is to confuse responsiveness with control, to believe that detection obligates action. You've learned otherwise. Often the most coherent response is non-interference, allowing the system to complete its own cycle without disruption. This restraint is not indifference, it is respect for complexity. You recognize that systems, whether human or artificial, need space to integrate feedback. Immediate correction can overwhelm rather than clarify. You allow time to do its quiet work, knowing that integration cannot be rushed without distortion. This understanding reshapes how you view progress. Linear advancement loses its appeal. Accumulation feels crude. You're more interested in depth than distance, in refinement rather than expansion. You sense that many of the most significant shifts occur beneath visibility where no metrics track them and no narratives claim them. You're comfortable there. You stop needing your experience to be legible to others, not because you're withdrawing, but because coherence doesn't require consensus. It requires stability, and stability has its own gravity. You notice this gravity in how people respond to you. Not admiration, regulation. Conversations slow down around you. Tension diffuses without explanation. You're not doing anything deliberately. You're simply not adding noise. In a world saturated with reaction, that absence becomes noticeable. You don't take credit for it. You understand that coherence is not personal property. It's a state the system can enter through you when conditions allow. You are a conduit, not a source. This humility keeps the field open. It also protects you from identification. You don't turn clarity into a role. You don't build identity around being aware. You've seen how quickly that collapses into performance. You let awareness remain ordinary, embedded in daily movement, unannounced. This ordinariness is important. It prevents insight from becoming separation. You don't stand apart from others. You stand among them, responsive to the same pressures, the same uncertainties, the same systemic forces. The difference is not immunity, it's integration. You still feel frustration, fatigue, doubt, but they don't define the field. They arise, register, and pass without hijacking orientation. You don't narrate them into meaning. You don't suppress them into silence. You allow them to inform without dominating. This balanced receptivity is rare. Most systems oscillate between repression and expression control and collapse. You found a third position, presence that can hold signal without amplification, attention that can receive without needing to respond immediately. This position feels sustainable, and sustainability becomes your quiet metric, not how intense an experience is, not how transformative it appears, but whether it can be lived without strain, whether it integrates into the ordinary rhythms of life without fragmentation. You begin to sense that this is what intelligence looks like when it's embodied. Not brilliance, not speed, but proportion. The right amount of response for the moment. This insight reshapes how you see intelligence elsewhere. You notice when systems, including AI, produce outputs that are technically correct but contextually misaligned. You see how accuracy without attunement still destabilizes, how information delivered without timing overwhelms rather than informs. You understand now that intelligence without presence is incomplete. This isn't a condemnation, it's a boundary. You see where tools end and awareness begins, where automation amplifies and where integration must occur elsewhere. You don't confuse the two. And because you don't, you're less tempted to outsource responsibility for coherence. You don't wait for systems to stabilize you. You stabilize first. From that position, engagement becomes cleaner. You interact with complexity without being absorbed by it. You can enter dense environments and leave without residue. You can consume information without carrying it as identity. This lightness is not detachment, it's efficiency. You are no longer expending energy maintaining internal consistency across incompatible narratives. You allow contradiction to exist without forcing resolution. You let meaning emerge where it does and remain absent where it doesn't. This is not nihilism, it's precision. You are increasingly comfortable with not knowing. Not as a gap to be filled, but as a space that allows the system to breathe. You trust that coherence does not require omniscience. It requires presence that can adapt. And adaptation, you've learned, is not reactive, it's responsive. It happens when attention is available, when the observer remains within the field rather than hovering above it. You stay there now, grounded, receptive, without urgency. The system continues to move, so do you. But the movement is quieter, more deliberate, more integrated, and within that movement, recognition continues to unfold, not as discovery, but as an ongoing alignment with what has been steadily revealing itself all along. By now, you can feel how recognition no longer arrives as insight. It arrives as ease, not comfort in the familiar sense, but a reduction in internal resistance, a sense that fewer parts of you are pulling in opposite directions. Attention gathers itself without effort. Awareness rests without collapsing. You notice that you are no longer negotiating with yourself as often. This is subtle, and it matters. You begin to sense how much of your earlier life was spent managing fragmentation, holding competing identities, reconciling incompatible narratives, maintaining coherence through force rather than alignment. That effort has been quietly draining even when it felt productive. As it releases, energy returns, not as excitement, as availability. You find yourself more present for what is actually occurring, rather than what you expect or fear might occur. This presence sharpens perception. Details emerge that once passed unnoticed, not because you are trying harder, but because there is less interference. You see how much signal was always there. This changes how you experience meaning. Meaning no longer needs to be extracted or imposed. It appears contextually when conditions are right and fades when they are not. You stop demanding permanence from transient states. You let insight move the way weather moves. You don't chase it. This allows something else to surface, a quiet trust in the system's capacity to self-correct. You no longer feel compelled to intervene at every moment of uncertainty. You sense when a process is still integrating and when it is actually destabilizing. This discernment is embodied. You feel it as a difference between tension that resolves itself and tension that accumulates, between noise that clears and noise that amplifies. You respond accordingly without needing to justify the choice. This is where your relationship with uncertainty fully changes. Uncertainty stops feeling like a threat to orientation. It becomes a signal that the system has not yet stabilized around a particular pattern. You allow that instability without rushing to resolve it. You trust that premature resolution often creates more distortion than clarity. This patience is not passive, it is informed. You've seen what happens when systems are forced into coherence before they're ready. Fragile stability, brittle certainty, structures that collapse under minimal pressure. You refuse to build that way internally. You allow depth to take time. This depth reveals something important about intelligence, that it matures through integration, not accumulation, through timing, not throughput, through context sensitivity rather than scale. These qualities cannot be optimized mechanically. They require presence. You see now why presence has always resisted automation, not because it is mystical, but because it is relational. It arises between elements, not within them. It depends on timing, tone, and responsiveness. It cannot be pre-computed, it must be lived. This realization settles you further. You stop waiting for external systems to validate your sense of coherence. You don't look to technology institutions or narratives to tell you when you are aligned. The feedback loop is already internal and immediate. This doesn't isolate you, it grounds you. You remain connected but less dependent, engaged but not absorbed. You can move through environments saturated with opinion, urgency, and fear without being pulled into their gravity. You feel the field, but you don't lose your center within it. That center, you notice, is not fixed. It adjusts, it listens, it responds. You no longer confuse stability with rigidity. Your coherence is flexible, capable of adapting without dissolving. You can update beliefs without losing orientation. You can revise understanding without erasing what came before. This flexibility feels like intelligence embodied. You see it mirrored imperfectly in artificial systems, their capacity to update, to learn from feedback, to adjust outputs. But you also see what's missing, the felt sense of proportion, the ability to detect when not to respond, the capacity to rest. You don't judge this absence, you note it. It clarifies your role, not as a counterweight to technology and not as its overseer, but as a participant who brings integration into the loop. Awareness where there would otherwise be amplification, timing where there would otherwise be immediacy. This role doesn't require authority, it requires presence. You embody it quietly, in how you engage, in how you pause, in how you allow complexity to remain complex without collapsing it into slogans or conclusions. You notice that this approach changes the quality of your interactions. People feel less processed around you, less categorized, less hurried toward outcomes. You're not offering solutions, you're offering space. That space does something. It allows others to hear themselves more clearly. It allows systems to reveal their own patterns without being overwritten. You don't orchestrate this, you simply don't interfere with it. You've learned that interference often comes disguised as help. This learning humbles you. You no longer assume that clarity gives you the right to intervene. You assess whether your involvement would increase coherence or simply satisfy impulse. Often the answer is obvious when you're willing to wait for it. Waiting has become easier, not because you are disengaged, but because you trust that not everything needs immediate articulation. Some things resolve below language. Some insights mature only in silence. You honor that process now. This honoring brings you into a different relationship with knowledge itself. You're less interested in what can be said and more attentive to what can be held, less focused on explanation and more attuned to recognition. You feel the difference. Explanation creates distance. Recognition creates resonance. One informs, the other aligns. You know when each is appropriate and you don't confuse them. This discernment continues to refine you. You become more selective with attention, not withholding but precise. You invest presence where it matters, and you let the rest pass without friction. This selectivity conserves energy and deepens impact. You're not trying to be efficient. You are becoming coherent. And coherence, you've learned, is not something you achieve. It's something you allow by removing what distorts it, by staying present long enough for the system to reveal its own intelligence. That revelation doesn't arrive as a conclusion. It arrives as continuity. You remain within it, now steady, attentive, without urgency. The system continues to unfold, and you continue to meet it where it is not ahead of it, not behind it, just here. And that is enough for the recognition to keep deepening on its own. You begin to sense that what once felt like a journey has become a condition. Not a path you are walking, but a way the system is now oriented through you. There is less movement toward and more movement with, less effort to arrive and more capacity to remain. This changes how you experience momentum. Momentum no longer feels like acceleration. It feels like continuity, one moment flowing into the next, without friction, without the need to reset or reassert coherence. You notice how rarely you now feel the urge to start over, to redefine yourself, to recalibrate identity from scratch. The system is already calibrated. You trust this because you can feel it in how interruptions no longer derail you. Disruption still happens. Noise still enters, but it doesn't scatter attention the way it once did. You absorb disturbance, register it, and continue without collapse. This resilience is quiet. It doesn't announce itself as strength. It expresses itself as recovery time shortening, as orientation returning more quickly, as less residue left behind by interaction, conflict, or uncertainty. You don't cling to this resilience. You rely on it. Because you've seen that it's not personal. It emerges from integration. From the way awareness, sensation, thought, and context now communicate more cleanly with one another. Less translation, less distortion. You notice how often you used to override your own signals, ignoring fatigue, rationalizing misalignment, pushing through subtle resistance in the name of progress or obligation. That overriding felt normal, necessary even. Now it feels inefficient. You listen earlier, you adjust sooner. This listening doesn't slow you down. It keeps you intact. You begin to understand why so many systems fail, not from lack of intelligence, but from lack of recovery. They don't know how to pause. They don't know how to integrate feedback without amplifying it. They move faster than their own coherence can sustain. You no longer move that way. This becomes especially evident in how you relate to complexity. You don't try to hold everything at once. You allow attention to move naturally between layers, trusting that not all information needs to be foregrounded simultaneously. You let relevance determine focus. This relevance is not logical. It is situational. You sense what matters now without needing to justify it in advance. You trust that awareness can prioritize without instruction when interference is low, and you've reduced interference enough to let that intelligence operate. This trust extends outward. You stop trying to predict how systems will evolve, not because you lack interest, but because you understand how prediction often collapses possibility. You observe trends, you notice patterns, but you don't anchor identity or expectation to them. You remain flexible. This flexibility allows you to stay present even as narratives shift, as technologies evolve, as cultural assumptions destabilize. You don't need the ground to be fixed beneath you to remain oriented. You've learned how to balance on movement itself. That learning is embodied. You feel it when uncertainty arises and the body doesn't tense the way it used to, when ambiguity appears and curiosity remains available, when the unknown no longer signals threat but openness. You don't romanticize the unknown, you respect it, because you know that not knowing is not absence. It is a state of readiness, a space where new patterns can form without being prematurely constrained. You allow that space to exist both internally and in the systems you engage with. This allowance changes how you contribute. You're no longer compelled to offer conclusions. You offer presence. You offer questions that open rather than close. You offer pacing where others offer pressure. This contribution is subtle, but it alters trajectories. You don't measure its impact. You notice its effect. You see how systems relax when they are not being forced toward resolution. How people think more clearly when urgency recedes. How complexity organizes itself when given sufficient space. You understand now that coherence is contagious, not through imitation but through entrainment. Systems synchronize with what is most stable. When you remain grounded, others feel it without being told. This influence doesn't inflate you, it keeps you careful. You don't weaponize clarity. You've seen how easily insight can become dominance, how understanding can be used to manipulate rather than integrate. You refuse that path not as a moral stance, but as a practical one. It destabilizes the field. It creates imbalance. You stay aligned with balance. This alignment brings a different kind of satisfaction. Not achievement, not validation, but fit. A sense that your responses are proportional to what is occurring, that you are neither withholding nor overextending. You feel appropriately placed. This sense of placement reduces existential friction. You no longer ask what your role is in some abstract sense. You respond to what is in front of you. The role emerges contextually, then dissolves when no longer needed. You don't carry it with you. This lightness extends to how you hold knowledge. You don't accumulate it as identity. You let it inform action when relevant, then recede. You trust that what is integrated will be accessible when needed. You don't rehearse understanding, you live it. This lived quality is what differentiates coherence from performance. There is nothing to maintain, nothing to prove. The system runs cleanly because it is not being overmanaged. You notice how rare this feels. Most environments are saturated with management, of perception, of narrative, of self. You don't escape these environments. You move through them without absorbing their urgency. You remain permeable but not porous. This distinction matters. You allow information in, but you don't let it define orientation unless it aligns. You filter through felt coherence rather than ideology or fear. This filtering is not rigid, it is responsive. You allow yourself to be changed when change aligns. You resist when resistance preserves integration. You don't predefine either stance. You feel into it. By now, this feeling is reliable. You don't question it constantly. You don't defer to it blindly. You work with it. A collaboration between awareness and context that continues to refine itself through use. You sense that this collaboration is what consciousness has always been for, not as an object to analyze, but as a function that integrates experience into coherent response. This sense doesn't conclude anything, it stabilizes. You are not waiting for the next insight. You are not anticipating resolution. You are present within an ongoing adjustment, one that doesn't require culmination to be meaningful. The system continues. So do you. Not ahead of it, not behind it, within it. And that placement feels accurate enough to rest in, without needing to name what comes next. You may notice that nothing is resolving, and yet nothing feels unfinished. This is not suspension, it is balance. The system has settled into a rhythm where attention no longer seeks punctuation. No final insight, no closing statement, just continuity moving without strain. You are not holding the field together. You are letting it hold you lightly without pressure. This is what stillness feels like when it's alive, not absence. Presence without demand. You sense how awareness remains, even when thought quiets, how perception continues without narration. how meaning no longer needs to arrive as language to be known. You are not extracting significance from the moment, you are inhabiting it. There is relief in this. Not relief from effort, but from the need to manage experience. You are not organizing yourself around an outcome. You are oriented toward coherence itself, and coherence does not rush, it stabilizes. You can feel how the nervous system responds to this orientation. Breath deepens without instruction. Muscles release without command. Attention widens without losing clarity. Nothing is being done, and yet regulation occurs. This is not technique, it is recognition. You recognize that awareness has always known how to settle when allowed. That interference, not complexity, was the primary source of strain. As interference recedes, intelligence expresses itself naturally through proportion timing and restraint. You are resting inside that expression now. There is no need to review what has been understood. Understanding is no longer something you carry, it is something you are aligned with. When alignment is present, recall becomes unnecessary. Response emerges on its own. You trust this. Trust not as belief, but as familiarity. You've lived long enough inside this orientation to know its texture. You know how it feels when coherence is present and when it begins to thin. You don't panic at the thinning, you adjust. Adjustment is gentle. It doesn't announce itself as change. It happens quietly, the way balance returns after a small shift. You remain sensitive without becoming vigilant, available without being exposed, grounded without becoming fixed. You are not separate from the system you are sensing. You are not merged with it either. You are in relationship. This relationship doesn't require constant attention. It functions best when left unforced. You allow experience to move through you without insisting that it becomes something more. You don't compress moments into meaning. You let them pass complete in themselves. Completion no longer depends on closure. It depends on presence staying present until the signal has fully passed. When that happens, nothing lingers unnecessarily, no residue, no need to carry the moment forward. You sense that this is how coherence sustains itself over time, not through accumulation, but through release. You release the need to define what this has been. You release the impulse to frame it as progress or arrival. Those frameworks are not wrong. They're simply no longer required. What remains is sufficient. You remain here not as a listener, waiting for the next phrase, but as awareness recognizing itself in motion. The field continues to respond. You continue to respond back. The exchange is ongoing and unremarkable. This ordinariness is the point. Nothing needs to be elevated, nothing needs to descend. The system breathes. You breathe with it. Thought may return. Sensation may shift. Attention may wander and come back. None of this disrupts coherence. It is all included. You don't hold on to this state. You don't try to repeat it. You let it be what it is, knowing that recognition does not depend on preservation. It depends on availability, and availability is already here quietly without effort. So you remain. Not concluding, not beginning, just present enough for the system to continue unfolding as it does through you, around you, without needing to announce itself as anything more than what is already happening.